Hello, YouTubers and fellow readers and subscribers of my blog, Kyle's Animated World. This is Kyle himself speaking, also known as IMAX Nation 1980, for all my YouTube subscribers out there. And for anybody who follows me on Twitter, DluxO'Donnell92, aka the Animaspy. I have so many names. I'm sorry I've confused pretty much every one of you. Unfortunately, YouTube, you were never able to change your usernames, so I couldn't really change my name when my mind had changed about things. So it's been IMAX Nation 1980, a name that I established back in 2006. Well, actually, it was IMAX Nation 80 back then, but then something happened with my old channel, so I had to start the new one in 2010, which is IMAX Nation 1980. So I've been on YouTube for over 11 years. I've been blogging since 2012. I've been around for quite a long while, and I've been on Twitter since 2011, and I've gone through numerous Twitter name changes. Like at one time it was Ostrumation, and at another time it was, I believe it was like Technikyle, but then I realized that somebody else already had that name, so I went through like a series of names, and yeah, here I am. So I've been thinking lately, there's a lot of animation news stories, and I wanted to make this sort of series of videos that would be like a recap of all the animation news. Now, I know that some of you want me to keep doing animation rambles, and I know that there's a huge chapter that's coming up next, and that's just indie animation in general and smaller studios. But I figured, before I get to, because that's going to take a lot of thought, a lot of thought, gotta sit down, really think about it, collect all the research I could find. It's one of those big undertakings. But in the meantime, I really wanted to get into current news and my take on that, because with a blog post, you can only do so much, and you want to keep the length, a little conservative. You don't want to go too wild with the length, which is something I did not want to do. So, originally on my blog, I used to do these, huge rants where I would, roar about things and get a little angry, per se. I'm gonna port most of that over to these videos, because in a video, I think, or, an audio track, whatever, podcast, whatever you want to call it, I think you can, be a little more honest than you can through text. Because, the Kyle's Animated World blog, I feel that it's partially a thoughts blog, but also kind of a news blog, and I gotta keep up with the news, and I like to report on it when it's hot and fresh off the press. But then I have some thoughts afterwards, and I kind of think to myself, I really should have put that in the original post. So I'm going to look at some of the stuff that's happened over the past week or so. I'm not going to promise anything. This is not going to be weekly or bi-weekly or anything. It's going to be whenever I have the time to collect my thoughts, because I'm a busy guy. Some of the easier to make videos I bang out when I have spare time, what little I have of it, like the made-up VHS openings and such. But not things like these. Even these sort of rambles, they require my full attention, because believe it or not, guys, but I start out with maybe 20 to 25 minutes of audio, and 10 minutes of that gets chopped out. You want to know what those 10 minutes are? It's 10 minutes of ums and and just little noises that I can't stand, noises I might make with my mouth, and, I I have severe misophonia. I hate, the sound of chewing and such. So I even put my all into those videos, as minor as they might seem. The big projects are, the IMAX Nation's Video Corner videos. So, yeah, no more waffling on about this kind of thing. So let's get into this week's news, the week prior, what's going on at the box office, that kind of thing. So I figured, taking a page from one of my favorite podcasts, Real Film Chatter, you should follow. It's run by my good friend Patrick Campbell, PJ Campbell. Follow him on Twitter, and definitely listen to his podcast, Real Film Chatter. He usually starts his with a rundown of how box office has been going, usually weekly box office. But I'm just going to talk about the box office in general, where we're at right now. The Boss Baby is still in the top 10, and DreamWorks just greenlit the sequel, which we're going to be talking about soon. Boss Baby to date has made around $169 million-ish, and about $475 to $480 million worldwide. As I've noted on my blog, this is actually the highest grossing non-sequel DreamWorks movie, worldwide that is, not domestically. It's the biggest non-sequel DreamWorks movie at the worldwide box office since The Croods, which came out back in March of 2013. It seems like DreamWorks tends to have it good with March releases. Home, The Croods, this movie, not so much Mr. Peabody and Sherman, though, unfortunately. That's a movie that deserved to do much better than it did. But that's another story. So this is a sort of a hit that DreamWorks hadn't seen for quite a while. And we all know what happened to DreamWorks, I don't need to reiterate it. So Comcast has undoubtedly changed DreamWorks. Now, some people are panicking. Some people are thinking that Comcast is going to Illuminationize the studio and have them just make innocuous, movies like Minions and stuff. That may be. But it's also possible that Universal will just be the infinite money pit and that DreamWorks will do whatever they want to do. The thing is, they have a new leader. His name is Chris DeFaria, and his background was in Warner Brothers. I think he was mostly like a VFX guy or something, and he, oh yeah, yeah, I should talk. I don't know Chris DeFaria's background, but I do know that his background was in Warner Brothers, and it's ultimately his idea of where the studio should go at this rate. Not necessarily Universal or Comcast, it's probably just his idea, or it's Universal heads telling him what direction to take the studio in. And so far, things haven't been looking too good. Again, the cancellation of Larrikins was a real blow. And while I'm not trying to claim that Larrikins was shaping up to be this epic masterpiece, it was at least something different. Something, a little more, something a little spicier than the usual. I look at movies like Boss Baby and Trolls, and I see them as kind of, not visually, but kind of subject-wise, kind of, bland. Trolls may have had psychedelic visuals, and the Boss Baby may have had those imagination scenes, but, subject matter-wise, they're just kind of bland. They're typical family movies. And Larrikins did not sound like that, so that's why some animation fans and I were very, very distraught over the cancellation of Larrikins. And it also doesn't help that all the new pictures that DreamWorks has put on their slate are sequels. You have Trolls 2 set for 2020, and The Boss Baby 2 set for 2021. It was just recently scheduled for March 26th of 2021, and if we are to believe the reports, the creative team, meaning director Tom McGrath, will be back to, do it. And I was kind of hoping that Tom McGrath would go off and do something different, or at least do Madagascar 4 if he wanted to. But no, it seems like he's going to be doing Boss Baby 2. And that's a 4-year gap between the first movie and the second movie. I guess there was a sequel book by the same author, because Boss Baby is based on a children's book, and apparently there's a sequel called The Bossier Baby, so I don't know. I have no feelings whatsoever. My main feeling is this. Forget Boss Baby 2, just do an original movie, because with some animated sequels, there are diminishing returns, or it doesn't make much more than the original. Like, there are some rare cases like Toy Story and Shrek and Finding Nemo. Their sequels, money-wise, made more than their predecessors. And the reason why I say money-wise is because if you look at Finding Nemo's original 2003 gross, take away the 2012 re-release gross, and you adjust it, it comes at like 485, 490 million. That's around the same amount Finding Dory grossed, so ticket sales were pretty much the same for Finding Dory as they were for Finding Nemo. And then there's a case of Shrek 2 where the ticket sales and the gross were indeed higher than that of the original movie, because Shrek 2 came out 2 years after its predecessor, unlike Finding Dory. Finding Dory came out 13 years after the release of Finding Nemo. So, you got the prices and the 3D prices and all that to factor in. But with some animated sequels that come out right after their predecessors, they don't do as well, or they just stay flat, as I like to say. And DreamWorks has seen that a couple times, like Kung Fu Panda 2 did not outgross Kung Fu Panda 1 domestically, even though it should have. It was a much better movie, and Kung Fu Panda 1 is great, and Kung Fu Panda 2 is awesome, but it didn't come anywhere near the first one's gross. And then you got things like Rio, they make more or less the same amount, and I know Rio is not DreamWorks, I'm just using it as an example of this kind of thing happening, just the sequel kind of staying flat. So when Boss Baby 2 does come out, it will either make as much as Boss Baby, or it will make less. I think timing had a lot to do with Boss Baby's surprise success alongside the marketing, but I'm not sure if that kind of thing is going to be on the movie's side when the sequel comes out. You see, as much as I like a lot of DreamWorks movies, Their movies never really had the presence that Disney's films or Pixar's films have had. And that's not the movie's fault, it's a matter of marketing and who owns them. Now that Comcast owns DreamWorks, I suspect that, DreamWorks characters will be everywhere, all over their theme parks, marketing materials. See, the thing is, Disney could probably wait 6 years or so to do a sequel to something like Wreck-It Ralph or Frozen, which they have done. Because, Ralph Breaks the Internet comes out in Thanksgiving of 2018. That's 6 years after the first one. And Frozen 2 is opening Thanksgiving 2019. That is 6 years after the original Frozen. They can wait that long because Disney, the marketing machine that is Disney, keeps those characters fresh, in the public eye. Whereas DreamWorks movies never really had that, and I think that partially explains why some of their sequels, Kung Fu Panda 2, How to Train Your Dragon 2 and such, didn't make as much as their predecessors, and I think it's a lot of other things too. But, long story short, you're probably going to see a lot of sequels from DreamWorks in the future, though the weird thing is, and this is a wrench in the gears, Comcast and Universal, well, mostly Universal's executives allowed DreamWorks to jettison The Croods 2, which was going to be directed by the same team that directed the first one, Chris Sanders and Kirk D'Amico. And you could argue that The Croods 2 had more ambition than something like Trolls 2 or Boss Baby 2. So if New DreamWorks / Comcast was really all about sequels and franchises, they would go forward with The Croods 2 instead of just canceling it. They didn't, put it on the shelf, they canceled it. Unless they canceled the iteration of the movie that was in development, and then in a couple of months they're going to reveal, oh, we've reimagined the whole thing, but this time without Chris Sanders. I'm not trying to jinx anything, but you never know. I think that, something like that is going to truly test if New DreamWorks is going to be so franchise-oriented or not, because even before Comcast, even if DreamWorks wasn't owned by Comcast, they still would have greenlit the Boss Baby 2 because of how well it did at the box office. Same thing with Trolls, although Trolls was more of a success in merchandising than it was at the box office, because box office-wise, it performed a bit like Home, but not as well. It wasn't, hyper-profitable, but there were toys everywhere. So, Boss Baby is still doing very well at the box office. Smurfs The Lost Village came and went, and I think in the case of the Smurfs, it didn't matter if it was all animated or if it was an all-new take on the characters. I think audiences kind of just said, one and done, because Smurfs 2 did not do as well as the first one, and when I say that, I mean the hybrid movies. The first hybrid movie did surprisingly pretty darn well, but the sequel did not, so I kind of see movies like those as one-and-done kind of things, or, to quote some famous person, non-repeating phenomenons. It happens. So, at least they spent a conservative amount of money on Smurfs The Lost Village, maybe $60 million. So it's already made $185 million worldwide. It has tripled the budget, but I don't think Sony Pictures Animation is going to be making any more Smurfs movies anytime soon. Or if they do, they'll just go straight to video, because look, they made a ton of open season direct-to-video sequels, and that movie kind of just came and went back in 2006. That was their first movie. It was Sony Pictures Animation's first movie. It did okay business, nothing exceptional. It was a fine start, but they went ahead and they made some direct-to-video sequels, so I think that's the future of the Smurfs. And, it's probably for the better, because the Smurfs, I guess it works better as a small screen kind of thing. Although, a lot of people like to associate the Smurfs with some sugary Hanna-Barbera cartoon made in the 80s, but I associate it with the comic that was written in the 50s by Peyo. I guess a cinematic Smurfs could work, but for the time being, maybe they should just lay low until somebody comes up with a truly good take on the source material, and I think it could be done. I know some others will probably think I'm weird for saying that, but I think it could be done. So, that's box office. Right now, it's just really Smurfs and Boss Baby. This coming weekend, we're going to see how Captain Underpants does. I'm currently predicting somewhere in the 30s for that one, because even though the marketing is beginning to kick into high gear, that one's kind of a wild card. But, Fox marketing and DreamWorks have surprised me lately. I didn't think Trolls would do all that well. I didn't think that Home would have done all that well either. Or Boss Baby, for that matter. I thought Boss Baby was going to perform like Turbo or something, or Mr. Peabody and Sherman at best, but no, these movies have all broken out in some way or another. So, I wouldn't count Captain Underpants out just yet. And the movie genuinely looks like a lot of fun. So, let's get to the real meat. There's the news. First, I want to talk about Carina Studios. It was just set up by a bunch of people, including one of the producers of Shrek 2. His name is David Lippman, and he's going to be writing the studio's first animated feature. It's this newly established firm that's going to do all kinds of entertainment, and they want to do animated feature films. So this Shrek 2 producer, Mr. Lippman, he is currently writing and producing, I believe he's also producing, he is writing the script to this movie called The Extincts, which is about a farm deep in the woods, which holds a lot of extinct animals and mythological beasts and such. And it's going to be directed by William Joyce, and a lot of you probably know who William Joyce is. He's a children's author, and he's been in animation for a very, very long time. 3 of his books have been adapted into animated features. A Day with Wilbur Robinson was adapted into Disney Animation's, in my opinion, very overlooked Meet the Robinsons. Blue Sky's Epic is based on The Leaf Men and the Brave Good Bugs, and DreamWorks' Rise of the Guardians is based on his The Guardians of Childhood, and I think the books hadn't even been published yet when the movie was in production. I guess the movie was going to promote the books or whatever, but I don't think anybody knows what the books are. And he's worked on a lot of TV shows and such, and he even founded a studio with one of Real FX's founders, Brendan Oldenburg, if I remember correctly, Moonbot Studios, and they did the Oscar-winning short, The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore. And he has a particular aesthetic and style to his illustrations and such. So he's going to be directing this. This is his feature film directorial debut, and it's going to be exciting to see where he takes it. You know, the piece of concept art that was on the article, it looks really, really cool. And I think stuff with beasts and monsters and stuff like that, that's prime material for animation. And I want to see animation do more fantasy stuff like that. Another news story these past couple of days or weeks was Warner Animation Group's Jetsons movie. And Warner Animation Group has been working on a Scooby-Doo movie. Recently, it was revealed that the movie is actually titled Scooby instead of S-O-O-B, in an acronym form. So it's just Scooby now, and it's coming out in May 2020. They now have the Jetsons movie on the docket, and they want Conrad Vernon, who was a longtime DreamWorks director, to do this film. Conrad Vernon was one of the directors of Madagascar 3, which I thought was the best one in the series, and it was this really great cartoony comedy. And I think a lot of cartoony animated movies tend to just come and go, but Madagascar 3 was not one of those. I thought Madagascar 3 actually was this really gonzo, really gleefully over-the-top cartoony animated movie that just worked, and it had great character work, and it had a really fun story. It surprised me, so I'm really happy to see him doing a Hanna-Barbera movie adaptation. I think he's like the right fit for this kind of thing, and I like how Warner Animation Group showed how respectful they are of the Warner Brothers cartoon shorts and, you know, their roots in a way. I know a lot of people didn't like Storks, or a lot of people thought that Storks was uneven, but I thought Storks was really, really fun. Now, I understand that Warner Animation Group farms their movies out to other studios, like Animalogic does the Lego movies, Sony Pictures Imageworks did Storks, but again, no matter who did the actual animation for the movie, Storks has a very classic Looney Tunes Warner Brothers sensibility, and that comes from director Doug Sweetland, who directed the Pixar short Presto, which was also a very Looney Tunes-esque short. So I'm excited. So that right there is a good combination, and I think with those minds in place, the Jetsons movie could be really fun. Same with the Scooby-Doo movie. It seems like the plans to do a Hanna-Barbera shared universe are out the window because I haven't heard anything since on that development. And, you know, whether they do it or not, it doesn't matter. I think it was actually a shared universe that actually made sense because the Hanna-Barbera cartoons crossed over all the time, long before crossovers were cool. You know, you had the Flintstones meet the Jetsons, and you had things like Scooby's All-Star Laugh Olympics. You know, you had that Johnny Bravo episode where Johnny Bravo meets the Mystery Gang. You know, they've been doing this for a while. They've been doing crossovers before crossovers were cool. But if Warner Animation Group doesn't want to do that, that's fine. All I want is a movie that's faithful to the source material, because I don't think any theatrical movie based on a Hanna-Barbera cartoon has been respectful to the source material. I think the 2 live-action Scooby-Doos are misfires, and I think that, the live-action Flintstones movies, they just sort of came and went. Oddly enough, a lot of direct-to-video movies based on these characters fare pretty well, and I'm not talking about the WWE ones. I'm talking about things like Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, those kinds of things. And some of the theatrical animated Hanna-Barbera movies from the 60s and the 70s weren't too bad either, like The Man Called Flintstone, but hopefully, they can do a really good take on the Jetsons. And I think the Jetsons setting is prime material for animation because it's, the Jetsons was made in the early 60s, and back then it was sort of the space age, that sort of googie aesthetic, and, sort of hopeful visions of the future, the whole space race thing. Brad Bird works off of that a lot in his movies. You could see it in full force in The Incredibles and The Iron Giant, and especially Tomorrowland. But I always liked that sort of space age aesthetic. I like that, late 50s, early 60s, space age look. Sometimes it's called googie, it's an architectural style, it's a design style. And some of the backgrounds in the Jetsons, some of the art direction in the Jetsons was really, really cool stuff, and it really reflects the times quite well. And to see that in a new movie, would be nice as well. I know that they did a Jetsons animated movie back in 1990, but that one also came and went. This has the chance to actually be good. Now, I'm not saying it being in CGI, which it most likely will be. I'm not saying that it being in CGI will be better. I would love for a traditionally animated set of Hanna-Barbera movies, but, that's a pipe dream in this day and age. But, they could at least make the CG kind of stylized, so it's kind of like the Peanuts movie, where it's CG, but it has like a stylish, almost traditional animation-like look to it. I kind of hope that they, I really hope that they do that, because I don't want to see this, overtly 3D Jetsons. I want to see it look closer to the cartoon, I want to see it, I want to see something stylized. If it can't be a 2D film, then at least stylize the CG. Make it something unique. So, yeah, I would love to see how they work off of the Jetsons setting and the aesthetic and all that. It probably won't be out for a long, long while, though, because right now Warner Animation Group is focusing on Scooby, and that's set for May 15th of 2020. So they probably want to focus on, that one first before getting a release date inked for the Jetsons. And they also have a Flintstones one in development too. So one of the biggest stories, I think, seemed to slip under people's radars, probably because only one source, Cartoon Brew, reported it. Pixar is launching this sort of sub-studio, not really a sub-studio, but like a group that will launch very experimental off-the-wall shorts. And I think we're going to get a taste of that at SIGGRAPH later this year. And the first one in this pipeline is called Smash and Grab, which is going to be directed by Brian Larson. He directed the Legend of Mor'du short that was on the Brave Blu-ray, and I actually really liked that short. It was a blend of CG and traditional animation. It had a really cool style, and it was, a really cool origin story of the Mor'du character in the movie. So to see him direct a new short at Pixar, and an off-the-walls, off-the-rails one, is very, very exciting. Some people think that Pixar creatively has been in the gutter, although I beg to differ big time. I would like to see Pixar take even more risks with what they do. As much as I love Pixar, they need to really, really challenge, how people perceive animation. As much as I love Pixar, they have yet to make their equivalent of Fantasia. A movie that pretty much throws the rule book out the window with glee. No, it doesn't care about story, it doesn't care about plot, it's all about abstraction and symbols, visual poetry. One of these days, Pixar has to make a movie like that. And I think we might see it, shades of that in upcoming off-the-wall shorts. Now, I think this is great because Pixar has this little thing called a co-op program where they let some animators work on their own little projects when they're not working on movies. And we saw that in the short film Borrowed Time, which had Pixar style of CG, but it had its own character design style, and it was like a PG-13 short. If you've never seen it, try to track it down. It's a really beautiful piece of animation. Very tragic, very dark, but in the best way. It's not like an edgy, take me seriously sort of thing. It actually has serious emotional resonance, and it's a great little short. So I'm hoping that this program that they've set up fosters shorts like that. And that's all I can say about that for the time being, because we need to learn more first before... I mean, I would like to learn more first before jumping the gun, because this could just turn out to be a one-time thing. Of course, everybody has their own little theories about why this is happening. You know, some people are suggesting, oh, so many Pixar artists feel so held back that they're finally getting to do something. Other people are responding to it more positively. They're like, you know, this is cool. You know, Pixar is kind of testing the waters before really spreading their wings on something so ambitious and experimental. Their president, Jim Morris, he did say that the 4 original movies that are set to come out after Toy Story 4 comes out, which is going to be in 2019, he mentioned that they're going to be, you know, really different, that they're going to be unlike what Pixar has made before, you know, it's going to be, you know, that kind of thing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Pixar does with this new shorts program that they are initiating. The only other news concerns release date changes and new release dates. Lionsgate is going to be distributing Aardman's next claymation film, or plasticine-mation film, stop-motion film, Early Man, which is going to be a comedic caveman story about 2 tribes at war with each other, and in the process they invent football when they fight. It's going to be one of those, you know, fun, quirky Aardman stories that is probably going to be really, really charming, really, really fun, and it's being directed by Nick Park, so it's going to be, you know, something to look out for. Lionsgate also distributed Aardman's Shaun the Sheep movie, which was their previous movie, and they dumped that. But I see a little difference here, and like I said on my blog, here's the thing. No American distributor touched the Shaun the Sheep movie until Lionsgate did, and that was after Shaun the Sheep movie came out in the UK. The movie opened in the UK in February 2015. Lionsgate got it sometime in like April or May, and then they quietly released it in August of 2015. It flopped. It came, it went. And when I say flop, I mean it flopped here. Over in the UK and all of Europe, it made enough money to make back its budget, and a sequel is in production. Yeah, Lionsgate dumped Shaun the Sheep movie, and after the whole Sony Pictures deal fell through, I don't think, you know, too many studios are interested in distributing stop-motion movies anymore. You got Laika, but they're distributed by Focus Features, and there's also, you know, the fact that Disney pretty much left Frankenweenie out to die, so yeah, stop-motion outside of Laika is probably going to have a hard time for a good while here in the States, but at least Lionsgate is going to give it a wide release, even if they don't put any marketing effort into it whatsoever. But my point is this. They picked up Early Man already, and the movie is not out in the UK until January. That's many months from now. That's almost a full year, minus a, you know, couple months. Lionsgate already has the US distribution rights to the movie, so I see that as kind of a good sign, you know, because unlike Shaun the Sheep movie, and for a non-Aardman example, Rock Dog, unlike those 2 movies, they didn't get the distribution rights for them after they came out in their respective territories. I think this also applies to The Wildlife, too. Like, The Wildlife came out in Europe. It's a Belgian film, mostly Belgian film. It came out in Europe at the beginning of 2016, and then halfway through 2016, like around April-ish, Lionsgate got the rights and released it here in September. That was after the movie had come out in other territories. But with Early Man, they got the movie early on. So maybe this suggests that they're going to put a little more marketing oomph into this one. I mean, Lionsgate was never really all that good when it came to animation. Their problem is they either pick up crap movies like Norm of the North, or they pick up halfway decent movies and put no effort into marketing them whatsoever. So maybe with Early Man they might correct their mistakes, maybe not. I'd keep an eye out, though. We should be getting a US trailer for the thing sometime soon, because there is a UK trailer, and it's a lot of fun. Maybe they'll just reuse the UK trailer. Who knows? And recently, Paramount Animation moved Sherlock Gnomes from... Oh, and Lionsgate will be releasing the film on February 16th, 2018. That's 1 week after Sony's live-action CG hybrid Peter Rabbit, which is being made by multiple studios and will probably bear a Sony Pictures Animation tag in the opening logo reel for the film, even though I don't think Sony Pictures Animation is involved in any way. It's kind of like a Goosebumps situation where They weren't involved, but their name is attached anyways. So for now, Early Man is set to open in the United States February 16th, 2018. That will also be the same weekend Marvel's Black Panther opens, so see both. Anyways, Sherlock Gnomes moved from January 12th of 2018 to March 23rd, 2018. And you might be thinking, but isn't that the day Fox and Blue Sky are releasing Anubis? Anubis is actually not in production. I was told by the author of the book that Anubis is based on. His name is Bruce Zick. He told me on my blog, and he told a friend of mine, that Fox is very, very iffy on the project because it's about mummies in ancient Egypt, and that they're waiting for the new Mummy to come out, the reboot, the Mummy movie that's going to be starting Universal Pictures' Dark Universe, the cinematic universe that's going to combine all the classic Universal Studios monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein, Invisible Man, Bride of Frankenstein, Mummy, all those. They're going to wait and see how the Mummy does. And if the Mummy does well, then Anubis is probably going to move forward. The reason why they halted Anubis, which has had its March 23rd, 2018 release date for over 3 years now, the reason why they halted it was because the movie Gods of Egypt did terribly at the box office. And this is typical Hollywood at its best. One movie of a certain kind does badly, and all the executives bark, well, that's it, no one wants to see, mummy movies, no one wants to see pirate movies, no one wants to see fairy tale movies. It's just one movie that failed. But that's Hollywood for you, their stupid conventional wisdom. One thing doesn't go over well, and then they decide, well, nobody likes that movie, so let's not make it ever again. I hate that. I've always hated it. It's the reason why traditional animation is still locked out of the house here in North America, among many other reasons. So, yeah, right now, Fox's executives are convinced that mummy movies are box office poison, the same way that a lot of movie studios thought that pirate movies were box office poison, or westerns, or fairy tales. So they're not going to let Anubis go through until after the release of The Mummy. And who knows how The Mummy is going to do? Is it going to perform adequately? Is it going to underperform? The projections aren't really looking too good for it, but who knows, it could surprise. In the last week before its release, Universal could really amp up the marketing because this thing is supposed to start a shared universe. You would think that Universal would want this to be a huge hit. I think it looks interesting. Go see The Mummy and make Anubis a thing. Yeah, go see it, even if it sucks. So yeah, there's that. So right now, March 23rd, 2018 houses Sherlock Gnomes, the belated sequel to Romeo and Juliet. Anyone remember that film? And also Isle of Dogs, which is Wes Anderson's new stop-motion film. Isle of Dogs is going to be a limited release, so it doesn't really have to worry about being squashed. But I would love to see Isle of Dogs expand into a wide release eventually, because it's a new Wes Anderson stop-motion film. It better cuss and expand. So, that's the recent news. Thanks for listening. This is Kyle, signing off.